Chapter 1441. This way. Meg strained his ears to listen carefully as he sped through the alleys. Judging from the terrified scream, it was probably a young girl who had been frightened. To scream at this time in the slums of the northern part of the city, there was a high chance that she was in danger. Meg moved very quickly and stopped at the intersection of an alley. Although he hadn't seen anyone yet, the scream was very close, so the person should be nearby. No. Don't come over, please don't come over. A terrified female voice came from the side. I think it's behind here. Amy had already taken out her magic caster's staff and excitedly pointed to the alley on the right. Yes, it's in this direction. Meg nodded and put Amy on the ground, then walked quickly into the alley with light footsteps. At this moment, a petite black shadow suddenly flitted silently over the high wall to the side. It flashed past Meg and jumped down the high wall like a kitten. You, a terrified male voice came from the other end of the alley, followed by the crisp sound of a sharp weapon hitting the wall. However, the sound of fighting suddenly stopped, followed by a dull thud on the ground, accompanied by a terrified scream. Meg turned into the alley with Amy and saw a tall beastman lying on the ground with his pants half off. He was holding his gurgling throat with his hand, and his eyes were wide open. He was no longer breathing. The fatal wound was the wound on his heart. It was a very clean and professional killing method. Although the beastman reacted, he still couldn't put up any effective resistance. And in the corner, a young girl in disheveled clothes was curled up in a corner, trembling. The petite figure had her back to Meg and the others, and a few drops of blood dripped from the sharp claws in her fist. She looked at the girl a little embarrassedly and comforted. Are you okay? The bad guy is dead. I should be the good guy. The girl was stunned when she heard this. She looked up at her, and her fear was reduced by half. Her. Meg looked at the familiar figure in black clothes and the pinkish-white beast ears, a little surprised. Sister Connie, why are you here? Did you get lost again? Remi asked with a surprised expression. Boss, Xiaomi, why are you here? The petite female orc turned around and looked at Meg and Amy with an even more surprised expression. She said awkwardly, I just came out for a walk. I'm not lost. Really? I almost believed him. We passed by here on our way home, Amy said, then glanced at the orc on the ground. But the bad guys were all killed by you, so we won't have any bad guys to fight. What a pity. We were passing by the alley outside and heard the girl's screams, so we chased after her, Meg said. He took off his coat and walked up to the human girl curled up in the corner. The girl looked to be about 13 or 14 years old. Her clothes had been violently torn, and there was a red handprint on her pale face. He gently covered her with his coat and said softly, Little girl, you don't have to be afraid. I'm Meg, the owner of Immerse. This is my daughter, Amy. The girl who saved you is an employee of our restaurant. Let's take her home. The warm coat immediately drove away the cold and the embarrassment caused by her torn clothes. The girl looked up at Meg. This uncle's smile looked so gentle, and there was also a cute little angel-like girl beside him. The fear in her heart was greatly reduced. Also, Immerse. Wasn't that the super famous restaurant? Was this uncle the owner of those restaurants? Yes. The girl slowly stood up with the help of the wall. She reached out and grabbed her collar. Her pale face was still filled with fear, and her eyes avoided the orc corpse lying on the ground. Let's go. Let's leave this place first. Meg turned sideways to shield the girl from the corpse on the ground. With the help of the gentle light from Amy's magic caster's staff, he led the girl to the street outside. Connie kept her claws, and quickly caught up with Meg and the rest, afraid that she would fall behind. What's your name? Where do you live? Meg asked gently as he walked to the girl's right. The girl pointed ahead, and softly said, Kelly, I live in front. We'll reach it after turning 3 alleys. All right, you don't have to be afraid. That bastard deserved to die. We'll send you to your door. Meg looked at the girl who was still trembling slightly, and felt a little upset. Even in Chaos City, there were still girls who faced all kinds of illegal acts. I shouldn't have gone out at night. I only wanted to buy a candy for my little brother. Kelly said with a sobbing voice. Kelly, it's not your fault. It's those scumbags who use the darkness to do evil. Meg stopped in his tracks and looked into Kelly's eyes. It's your freedom to go out at night. It's not a reason for those scumbags to hurt you. Kelly looked into Meg's eyes. She was a little lost, but also a little touched. She had never heard anyone talk to her like that. It was just like the teachings she had always heard: wrap yourself up tightly, and don't go out at night. It was as if all the crimes were because they wore skirts that exposed their calves, or because they didn't return home before the sky turned dark. Yes. Skirts are so pretty. Why can't you wear them? The stars at night are so beautiful. You won't be able to see them if you stay at home. Amy nodded in agreement. As for the bad guys, just kill them all. Kelly looked at Amy's confident look and couldn't help feeling envious. She didn't even have such courage. But there seemed to be quite a lot of scumbags like that here. I've already met many of them these past few days, Connie interrupted. Kelly was silent. Living in the slums, she often heard the unfortunate stories of girls. A weak girl like her had no ability to fight back when faced with invaders from other races. Don't worry. This situation will definitely change. Let the girls wear skirts and go out at ease, and see the beautiful night sky and stars. Meg said with a smile. He already had some ideas in his mind. Since the City Lord's castle couldn't manage the safety of the slums at night, then it was up to him to do something. He sent Kelly to the door. Just as she was about to knock, the door was opened. A 2 to 3-year-old boy wobbled into Kelly's arms and called her sister in a childish voice. Here, have some candy. Kelly loosened her clenched fist and passed a very ordinary cane candy to the little boy. Candy. The little boy happily grabbed the candy and licked it. Kelly, what's wrong? Who are they? A middle-aged woman and a middle-aged man quickly walked out of the room. Seeing Kelly in a coat, with messy hair and a red handprint on her face, they quickly shielded her behind them and stood in front of Meg and the others. Chapter 1442. Mother, this is the boss of Mammoth. I met some bad guys on the road just now, and they saved me, Kelly hurriedly explained. Why did you sneak out without telling us? If your brother wanted to eat candy, he could have bought it tomorrow. The middle-aged woman looked at Kelly's swollen face with reddened eyes, and said with a pained expression, if anything happened to you, what would your father and I do? That man turned around and came out with a kitchen knife. He looked at Kelly with a red face, and said, where is that bastard? How dare he bully my daughter? I'm going to fight him to the death. The bad guy is already dead, Amy said. The man and woman were stunned. They looked at Meg and the rest differently. Thank you very much for saving Kelly. Please come in and have a seat. The woman hurriedly bowed to Meg and the rest, and thanked them gratefully. I'll go and buy some wine. The man kept the kitchen knife behind him, and scratched his head. It's all right. We just happened to meet him when we were passing by, and did something that we should do. Meg shook his head with a smile, and then said, that guy deserved it. You don't have to be afraid. However, since someone is dead, the Grey Temple and the City Lord's castle will definitely investigate. If they find you, tell them to look for me directly at Mammoth. Meg declined Kelly's family's warm invitation. After Kelly went into the house to change her clothes, he took back his coat, and left with Amy and Connie. Meg looked at Connie, who was dressed in black, and asked curiously, are you out for actual combat training? Connie nodded proudly, and said, yes. Master said that it's meaningless for me to continue training in the Bastille prison, so he asked me to come to the north of the city to find some scumbags for actual combat training. Including the one today, I've already killed 10 scumbags who hurt girls. I see. Meg was a little surprised by Rex's training method, but it was indeed a good method to get rid of evil while training. Big sister Connie, you're really awesome. Amy gave her a thumbs up, and then eagerly said, can you bring me along next time? I'm also super fierce when it comes to beating up bad guys. Well, Connie was a little hesitant. She looked at Amy, and said, although I want to bring Amy along, I'm running on the wall. I'm afraid that you can't catch up. It's okay. You can run on the wall, but I can fly. Amy opened her arms. Connie looked at Amy, who was hovering in the air with her wings in surprise and envy. She nodded and said, "If that's the case, then there's no problem at all. Little Amy, come down." Mag waved at Amy. Amy kept her wings and landed in Meg's arms. He hugged her. "You can't use your wings so casually," Meg whispered. He looked around cautiously. Amy's wings were a gift from the Pope. Although the church didn't have much influence in the Roth Empire, such a supernatural gift seemed to come from another level. Hence, he didn't want Amy to show off her wings in front of others for the time being. "Oh." Amy shrugged. She was a little disappointed. However, she quickly looked at Connie and said, "But I still have my windfire wheels. Although it's a little conspicuous at night, I can still keep up with big sister Connie's speed." "All right. Let's do it together tomorrow." Connie nodded with a smile. Meg looked helplessly at the two people who had agreed to beat up the bad guys. He didn't want to stop such a positive agreement. He walked to the main street and said to Connie, "Are you coming back with us, or are you going to continue with your trial?" "It's too early now. I'm not sleepy at all. Also, this is the peak time for those scumbags to appear. I plan to guard this area for a while longer. Boss, you can go back first." Connie shook her head. She jumped onto a high wall at the side with a light leap. She waved at Meg and the others, and quickly disappeared into the night. Amy's eyes followed Connie into the distance. She opened her mouth to say something. "You want to go back and sleep? You still have class tomorrow." Meg continued walking with Amy in his arms. Not long after, Meg hailed a horse-drawn carriage. He took the carriage back to the restaurant, and happened to run into Irina, who had just returned from outside. "Mother." Amy let go of Meg's hand, and jumped into Irina's arms. Irina carried Amy, and then looked at Meg, and said, "I'm hungry." "I'm hungry too." Amy raised her little hand. "All right, I'll go and make supper for you now." Meg opened the restaurant's door with a smile. He poured 2 cups of warm water for them, and then went into the kitchen to get busy. Amy snuggled in Irina's arms, and told her about going to celebrate Jessica's birthday that night, and how they met the bad guys. "Oh, so there are so many bad guys in Chaos City. That's interesting." Irina's eyes lit up after hearing Amy's story. "Mother, are we going to team up and beat up the bad guys?" Amy asked eagerly. Irina nodded, and said, "Sure. Why don't we get everyone in the restaurant to go and beat up the bad guys together? Take it as a rehearsal." That's not a bad suggestion. Why didn't he think of such a constructive idea? After pondering for a while, he said, "If that's the case, do we need a uniform and a cool team name?" Mag nodded as he poked his head out of the kitchen. Why didn't he think of such a constructive idea? Isn't it just beating up a bad guy? Do we need to make it so exaggerated? Irina smiled contemptuously, and then said, "Why don't we call ourselves the Heresy Trial Union? FFF Society?" Meg raised his eyebrows. "Then do we still need to prepare the Black Robe and the Grim Reaper's scythe?" Irina thought for a while, and then nodded. "That sounds pretty good. What about the slogan? Burn that heretic to death." Amy raised the torch. That sounds pretty good." Irina's eyes lit up. "Then, should we capture all the bad guys and burn them to death? That way, they won't dare to hurt innocent big sisters." Amy nodded. Meg smiled, and went back to the kitchen to continue cooking. Armed deterrence was the biggest deterrent to the bad guys. When necessary, they should teach them a lesson. The next morning, the people from the Grey Temple came. "Mr. Meg, an orc died in the north of the city yesterday. According to our investigation, you and your employees might be involved. We hope you can cooperate with our investigation," a young Grey Temple inspector said to Meg, who opened the door. Chapter 1443. Meg looked at the 2 young inspectors from the Grey Temple. They weren't aggressive, and he glanced at the customers lining up outside. He didn't want others to know about Connie's incident for the time being, so he stepped aside and said, "Please come in and talk." "All right." The 2 inspectors nodded and walked into the restaurant. Meg closed the door behind him and looked at the 2 young inspectors, hesitating about what to say. "Mr. Meg, We already know the details of the incident. That orc yesterday was a criminal we were pursuing, and he was responsible for 7 lives. He was in the process of assaulting a young girl last night, and he was killed by someone who tried to stop him. The person who killed him should be an employee of your restaurant. You were also at the scene last night, right? The inspector who spoke earlier asked Meg. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. It sounded like they were telling him that the orc deserved to die, and that they were doing the people a favor. He nodded with a smile, and said, yes. The 3 of us were on our way to the north of the city to celebrate the birthday of my daughter's friend. We heard cries for help on our way back, so we rushed to the scene of the crime. The orc was very vicious, and that employee had no choice but to kill him to protect the young girl. Thank you for standing up to protect the residents of Chaos City. There have been many good deeds of chivalry in the north of the city recently, and I'm sure it has something to do with that employee of your restaurant. Can we meet her? The annual Top 10 Citizens Selection event is about to begin. Perhaps we can apply for a spot for her, the inspector continued. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly, and sighed. She's a shy girl, and has a phobia of attention. The Top 10 Citizens Selection might not be suitable for her. She doesn't even want to show her face. If you think she's doing the right thing, then let her continue to do it. But she has some problems here. Meg pointed at his head and said regretfully, she's such a good girl. She's so young and should have had a beautiful youth. If she suddenly receives too much attention, I'm afraid her condition will worsen, or even. The 2 inspectors looked at each other, hesitated for a while, and said, all right, since that's the case, we won't force it. Please thank her on our behalf, Mr. Meg. If you need anything, please inform the Grey Temple immediately. All right, please take care. Meg nodded and sent the 2 inspectors away. Father, what's wrong with Big Sister Connie's head? Amy, who had been watching from the side, asked curiously. Senile dementia came early, Mag said with a sigh. He couldn't help laughing too. Even though Meg had expected that the matter with the Grey Temple would be resolved smoothly, it was clear that the Grey Temple approved of the residents' efforts to stop the violence. After the morning business hours, Meg took a letter of authorization and rode his bicycle to the Mercenary Guild. He walked straight into the guild hall, and arrived at the mission area. The staff behind the counter were all busy, and there were many people who were seriously filling in the form of missions. Meg queued up in front of the counter, and the staff behind the counter handed him a form without even looking up. Sir, please fill in the form first when you want to issue a mission. Choose the type of mission you want to issue, the specific requirements, the mission time, and the specific reward. All right. Meg took a pen and sat down in front of the counter, and began to fill in the form. After about 5 minutes, Meg handed the form over, and said, I'm done. Please take a look and see if there's anything else you need to add. The young staff took a look at the words on the form, and her eyes lit up. It was the first time she had seen such beautiful handwriting in the 3 years she had worked here. However, after looking at the form carefully, she couldn't help but let out a soft gasp of surprise, and then looked up at Meg. Is there a problem? Meg asked with a smile. No. Are you sure this is what you want to commission? The staff asked, and her voice was a little unnatural. It was the first time she had encountered such a commission. Yes, I want to start a gentleman's alliance, and commission all the mercenaries and residents who are full of gentlemanly spirit to protect all the people who need to be protected after nightfall, and work hard to eliminate the thugs who use the night and dark areas to harm the weak, and I'm willing to pay a certain amount of reward as a reward. Meg nodded with a smile. Is this not in accordance with the regulations? Hearing Meg's words, many people who were filling in the form around him looked at him in surprise. Such a commission was really unexpected. It's the first time I've encountered such a commission. Please wait a moment, I need to ask my leader. The staff was also a little hesitant, and said to Meg before getting up and leaving quickly. Not long after, the staff came back with a tall and thin middle-aged man. Mr. Mack, I didn't expect it to really be you. That tall and thin man smiled when he saw Meg. I didn't expect you to be from the Mercenary Union. Meg also smiled at that middle-aged man. Cartera was considered a regular in the restaurant, and would come back for a meal every few days. His favorite dishes were beggar's chicken and beef kebabs. I heard you want to set up a gentleman's alliance and work hard to eliminate the thugs. Cartera asked Meg. Yes. I encountered a case of sexual assault against a young girl on the way here yesterday. Such a thing happened in Chaos City, and it touched me greatly. I hope Chaos City can become better. Chapter 1444. Meg walked out of the mercenary union's gate and kept the certificate in his hand before pushing his bicycle away with a smile. The commission was handled very smoothly. When he left, the Gentlemen's League's commission had already lit up at the top of the commission wall. It was pinned to the top manually, and caused quite a commotion in the mission distribution area. Mag didn't know what kind of impact his actions would have on Chaos City, but as a member of this city, he had to do what he could do at the moment. He made the Gentlemen's League's funding open, which meant that if anyone wanted to support this project, they could also invest in it. The most important thing now was how many residents would respond and join the Gentlemen's League. Judging from the commotion just now, it shouldn't be that no one would take action. The Gentlemen's League. Michael paced around the meeting room with a frown. An official from the City Lord's castle chuckled and said, "This Mr. Meg is really interesting. He actually thought of using mercenary missions to protect the residents in Tata." Interesting? Michael looked at that official with a serious expression and said, "I don't think this is funny. It's a form of punishment. The order and rules that we are so proud of are not able to protect the safety of the residents at the bottom. Instead, we need another resident to use mercenary missions to maintain the order. Isn't this our dereliction of duty?" That official quickly kept his smile and sat up straight with his head lowered. The atmosphere in the meeting room also became a little tense. All the officials looked very serious. City Lord, the Grey Temple and the City Lord's castle have limited manpower. The patrols are already at their limit, but we can't cover every place. The bad guys are always able to find some loopholes. This is our dereliction of duty, but I'm afraid it will be very difficult to make up for it in a short period of time, an official answered. Michael nodded and said, "I'm aware of this as well. We've already done our best with the patrolmen. The lack of manpower is a serious problem. You guys start recruiting more patrolmen to ensure that we can cover all regions." City Lord, should we stop the Gentlemen's League? This might have a certain impact on Chaos City's current system, an official said worriedly. This is a good thing to protect the residents and punish the criminals. Why should we stop it? Shouldn't we support and encourage them? Michael shook his head with a smile on his face. If ordinary people can join the team to stop crime and violence, we won't have to worry about manpower. Have you heard? A gentleman's alliance has appeared in the mercenary guild today. As long as you join the Gentleman's Alliance, stop and punish violent criminals, and protect ordinary people, you will be able to receive a certain amount of rewards. I saw it in the guild this morning. Not only is there a reward, but there are also gentleman points. It's said that the Gentleman Alliance has a gentleman points ranking. You can earn points according to the missions you complete and leave your name on the gentleman points ranking. I didn't expect that there would be so many bastards around us. My blood is boiling. Tonight, I've decided to go to the north of the city and wait. If I meet any of those scumbags, I'll beat their heads to a crooked angle. I don't want the prize money, but I've decided to add another 100,000 copper coins to the bet so that more people can beat this bastard together. Brother, count me in. Bring me along, I want to beat up that bastard too. At the entrance of Amy's in the afternoon, there was a temporary harmony between the sweet and savory parties. The most talked about was the news about the Gentleman's Alliance that had spread like wildfire. Because that bounty mission had been pinned at the top of the Mercenary Guild ever since it was released, almost all the mercenaries who went to the Mercenary Guild today knew about it, and it quickly spread outside the Mercenary Guild. The atmosphere of order and equality in Chaos City was very different from other places in this world. However, very few people would pay attention to how the people living in the slums in the north of the city lived, and what kind of predicament they faced. Many people didn't even know that there was a group of people living below the poverty line in this city. They lived without dignity, and had to go through all kinds of dangers and pain. Hence, When all this happened in front of them, it gave them a huge impact and a great deal of indignation. The customers outside are all very excited. They seem to be talking about something about the Gentleman's Alliance. I heard that someone posted a mission at the Mercenary Guild to subdue the criminals with a reward. MIA came in from outside, and agitatedly said, "This is really a good thing. If everyone is willing to participate, then the criminals will be hated by everyone, and they won't be able to stay in Chaos City anymore." Yes, I think it's pretty good too. We can earn money from beating up the bad guys. That would be a great feeling. Barbara nodded in agreement. I wonder who came up with such a good idea. Raina was even more agitated. As a girl who grew up in the slums, she knew how scary the night was to them. However, if everyone was willing to help them, then everything would be different. I'm the one who did it, Meg said proudly as he cleared his throat at the entrance of the kitchen. Everyone looked at Meg when they heard that. Boss, did you really do it? MIA looked at Meg in shock. Yes. On the way back last night, Amy, Connie, and I met a young girl who was almost hurt. Such things often happen in the darkness in the north of the city. Since the City Lord's castle and the Grey Temple can't solve this problem for the time being, I wanted to do something. Meg nodded with a smile, and said to everyone, "Of course. I discussed it with Princess Irina yesterday, and we think this can be a training ground for our restaurant before we go to the Orcs territory to hone our teamwork skills." Boss is really a good person. Raina thought to herself. This is really good news for a girl living in the slums. In this case, there's not enough to go around. Connie murmured. Although the north of the city was so big that she couldn't cover it completely, she still felt as if the cake that originally belonged to her had been cut up. Oh, yes. Our restaurant has been invited to the Aiden Chamber of Commerce's year-end banquet tonight. We'll be closed for the night. Is everyone willing to go? Meg asked. I'll go alone. Camilla raised her hand. She didn't want to go to the banquet as Amy's employee. If that happened, she wouldn't be able to survive in the circle anymore. She would probably end up worse than her Uncle Dracula. Can I wear a helmet? Connie raised her hand. She was looking forward to it. She hadn't participated in any interesting activities ever since she came to Chaos City. She went in and out of the restaurant every day with a helmet. If you think it's okay, you can go. Meg nodded. Chapter 1445. We'll stop business for tonight and support the Gentlemen's League. Before the lunch service started, Meg hung a plaque at the door. It made the customers sigh again. Mr. Mac, don't tell me we can't even eat hot pot tonight. Vanessa looked at Meg pitifully. Yes, the restaurant is completely closed for tonight. Meg nodded with a smile. He had no choice. He had already promised to go to the Aiden Chamber of Commerce's mid-year meeting. He couldn't possibly leave Raina alone in the restaurant to cook hot pot while everyone went to have fun. Even Mamis has joined the Gentlemen's League. It seems like we have to go and do something tonight. The customers lamented that the restaurant wouldn't be open for business tonight, and their interest in the Gentlemen's League increased. Many customers were already itching to try it out. After the busy lunch service ended, Meg smiled at the ladies and said, "If you don't have suitable clothes for tonight's banquet, you can go to Suede to take a look. Just say that you're Mamis employees, and put whatever clothes you buy under my name. I'll pay for it later. Take it as a small gift for everyone's hard work during this period. Buy new clothes." The ladies' eyes lit up. Meg nodded with a smile. Yes. There are still more than 4 hours before the banquet. You can do whatever you want. Gather at the restaurant around 5 p.m., and we'll set off together. Thank you, boss, the ladies said happily. They bade farewell to Meg before leaving together. Even Anna was brought away. Judging by the time, the elves going south should have reached Chaos City by now, right? Meg went upstairs to the study. Irina had already discussed the matter of settling the night elves with City Lord Michael, so he didn't have to get too involved to avoid being noticed. As for the matter of setting up the factory, Meg planned to talk to Hill if he could meet her tonight. After all, he had given her the authorization to use the steam engine. If Hill cooperated with him, It would be much easier for him to raise funds and promote his products in the future. If there was money to be made, everyone would earn it. Mag was very clear about that. As an unqualified businessman, he didn't want to do everything himself. It would be best if he could lie down and collect money. As for the night elves, the sudden influx of 20,000 laborious into Chaos City was naturally the best choice for the new factory. Morton Manor. Cyril, that bastard. How dare he mix with Bowen and Harvey? He's simply inviting a wolf into the house. Geoffrey smashed the cup in his hand and said angrily. His chest was heaving up and down because of his anger. Secretary General Menord lowered his head slightly. After a while, Geoffrey's anger gradually subsided. He looked up at Menord and asked, "How many directors support Gloria now?" If the directors from the Marquis and Dodges families support young Master Cyril, excluding the directors from the Buffett family, there shouldn't be more than 10 directors who support Miss Gloria, Menord answered. The Aden Chamber of Commerce has a total of 68 directors. Geoffrey frowned with a hint of worry. Menord suggested, "Master, do we need to gather all the directors and express your position to them? After all, Miss Gloria has just entered their sights. They might be biased and don't understand her. There's no need for that. It would just be a joke." Geoffrey shook his head, and his expression calmed down. If she can't even get past this, she can't take on the family Morton. Yes. Menord nodded. In the moving carriage, the secretary looked at Hill, who was resting with her eyes closed, and said, "Miss, according to your request, the 21 directors under the Buffett family have all agreed to vote for Gloria tonight." "How many votes does she have now?" Hill didn't open her eyes and asked casually. "According to the news, the Marquis and Dodges families have already allied with Cyril. They have at least 30 stable votes in their hands. With Cyril's many years of operations in Family Morton and his special identity as the successor, he should be able to get more votes than Gloria. As for the remaining independent directors, we don't know what they want yet. The number of confirmed votes in Gloria's hands should be around 25, the secretary answered quickly. The corners of Hill's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a mocking smile. "Speaking of which, shouldn't I support Cyril? With his foolish act of joining forces with Bowen and Harvey, as long as he accepts the family Morton, I don't have to do anything. He can squander all of family Morton on his own." In the evening, Irina returned to the dining room. "I've arranged for all of them to go to the factory," Irina said as she ate the beggar's chicken that Meg made for her. "What about the accommodation for the night?" "There aren't enough rooms for now," Meg asked. "I asked them to bring back some wood on the way here. They're building a house now. We're elves, the race that understands the wood element the most. When it comes to building wooden houses, even the dwarfs aren't as good as us," Irina said confidently. "All right." Meg nodded. Since he didn't need to worry, he wouldn't ask too much. He said, "There's a banquet tonight at the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Everyone in the dining room will be attending. Do you want to go? Are you in charge of cooking?" "No, I'm considered an invited guest. I don't have to cook." "Then what's the point of going? The food made by the other chefs is so bad." Irina shook her head and took a bite of the drumstick. "I'm going to the factory tonight to make arrangements for them." "Okay." Meg nodded. The matter of the night elves was indeed more urgent. This banquet was just a matter of whether or not they could attend. After filling her stomach, Irina left immediately. She had a lot of things to do in order to make arrangements for the 20,000 elves. Meg took a look at the time and went upstairs to change into a casual black suit. Considering that the temperature outside was a little low, he put on a grey coat over it. Meg had just gone downstairs when there was a knock on the door. Meg opened the door. A group of beautiful girls wrapped in down jackets of various colors stood at the entrance of the dining room and looked at him with smiles. "Boss, look at our new clothes. The clothes from Suede are so nice. They're warm and as light as a feather. They're so comfortable," Yarbemia said happily. Meg looked at the girls wearing down jackets and smiling like flowers. He didn't know what to say for a moment. Although blue Suede's down jackets were very fashionable, and they were indeed light and comfortable to wear, but they were going to attend a banquet after all. Wouldn't it be a little strange for everyone to wear down jackets? Yeah, it's too warm. It's all foggy. I can't even see. Connie, who was following behind them, faced a tree and said seriously, Boss, can I take off my helmet? Chapter 1446. No, you have to bring your helmet and brain with you. Meg walked over and turned on the fog removal mode for her. Connie's eyes lit up as she looked at the big tree in front of her. She smiled awkwardly and said, All right, then I'll bring my helmet and brain to the banquet. Meg looked at all the girls in down jackets and still felt a little strange. However, it didn't seem realistic for them to change into gorgeous banquet attire at this time. I'm back. Amy's voice rang out from behind everyone. Everyone turned around and saw Amy in her magician robe jumping over. The 2 ponytails on her head swayed slightly, and she looked very cute. Wow, everyone is wearing beautiful new clothes. Amy looked at everyone, and her eyes lit up. Then, she turned to look at Meg. Father, do I have new clothes? I want to wear the same clothes as everyone. All right, then let's go in and change. Meg looked at the expectant Amy and nodded with a smile. He had prepared a beautiful little dress for Amy, but now it seemed that the little dress wasn't as attractive as the down jacket. Since everyone was wearing down jackets, then he might as well let Amy wear a down jacket and attend the banquet. Moreover, this was a new product from Suede, after all. In this world, it was probably quite trendy, right? After a while, Amy, who had changed into a short purple-blue down jacket, skipped out and joined the group of down jackets. The light, round, and white rabbit ear muffs made her look very cute. Let's go, we should set off. Meg raised his hand to look at his watch. It was almost 5 o'clock, and the 3 carriages that they had booked in advance were already waiting at the door. Everyone got on. Father, where's big sister Irina? Isn't she going to the banquet? Amy asked Meg as she got on the same carriage as Meg. She's probably very busy. After all, she has to be responsible for so many night elves. Meg smiled and shook his head. All right. Amy was a little disappointed. Other than Irina, Shirley didn't come either. That day in the wind forest, he saw with his own eyes how Blower's father, Vincent by Billy, severed one of Elliot's arms before being killed by all of the elves. However, Meg didn't see Blower on the battlefield that day, so he wasn't able to bring him back. Anna's expression was also a bit serious. She used her small hand to support her chin and lifted the curtain a very small crack. She looked out of the window, thinking about something. Anna, don't worry. Shirley will come back. Just like usual, he will remember his promise with you. Meg reached out and gently placed his hand on Anna's head. The little girl had a sensitive heart that did not match her age. Okay, Anna replied softly, but her expression didn't lighten up because of Meg's consolation. Amy stuffed Ugly Duckling into Anna's arms with a smile, and said, Big sister Anna, you can pinch Ugly Duckling for a while. When you're unhappy, you can pinch its soft face, and it will become better. Meow. Ugly Duckling was confused. Why would she pinch it when she was unhappy? Anna reached out and cupped Ugly Duckling's soft, chubby face. It was warm in her palms. She pinched it with both hands at the same time, and the round face slowly became flat. Then, she pinched it again, and it changed into another shape. So cute. A smile appeared on Anna's face. It was as if she was holding a warm flask. Furthermore, it was so soft and comfortable to the touch. Ugly Duckling stared with its big, innocent blue eyes. It was intimidated by Amy's pressure, and could only let Anna play with it. Meg looked at Anna, whose smile gradually brightened up because she was stroking the cat, and a smile also appeared on his face. Children indeed knew what children liked better. The square in front of the Aiden's Guild building was already filled with all kinds of luxurious horse-drawn carriages. Almost all the members of the Aiden Chamber of Commerce had gathered for today's year-end celebration. All the leaders and big shots in Chaos City's business world had gathered. Cyril, who was wearing a luxurious red and black robe and a green hat with a huge red gemstone on his head, stood at the entrance of the hall and greeted the merchants who were entering. However, those who could make Cyril take the initiative to greet were mostly the directors of the Aiden Chamber of Commerce. As for the normal merchants, they all tried to get to know Cyril with a smile when they saw him. However, most of them were ignored by Cyril with his nostrils. Cyril couldn't hide the smile on his face. As long as he removed Gloria from her position as a director today, he would be the only successor of Family Morton. Furthermore, Frank had also promised that when he became the head of Family Morton, he would help Harvey become the president of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. With the three families working together, Cyril was completely confident that he could remove Gloria from her position. As for the Buffett family, he didn't think that Gloria could persuade that woman on the hill to stand on her side. When he became the head of the family in the future, he would find a reason to take back the Swade. He heard that Gloria had expanded the factory again. It had only been 2 to 3 months, but she was already making over $1 million a month just by selling clothes. Everyone could see the future potential of this store. Although this was nothing compared to Family Morton's wealth, he just didn't want his family to be able to live a good life after leaving Family Morton. The slums in the north of the city were the best place for their family to return to. Director Donsel. Cyril reached out to shake hands with a bald middle-aged man with a smile. After exchanging some pleasantries, they exchanged a knowing look. After Cyril and Donsel finished exchanging pleasantries, he saw Meg walking past him with a group of beautiful women. Why is this guy here again? Cyril frowned. During the last mid-year meeting, it was this guy who embarrassed him and was with Gloria. He didn't expect him to be here again today. He remembered that he didn't join the Aden Chamber of Commerce and once claimed that he wanted to overthrow the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Wow. Those girls are so beautiful. Their clothes are so special too. They look so cool. If I'm not wrong, the clothes they're wearing are Swade's new clothes that haven't been officially released yet, right? I think they're called down jackets. Oh my god. They actually got the pre-sale money, didn't they not start selling it yet? Could they be Swade's staff? The effect on the upper body is simply amazing. It feels super light, but it also looks very warm. The women's attention was attracted by the down jackets Yarbemia and the others were wearing. Many of them were Swade's loyal fans. During this period of time, they had been eyeing Swade's new winter clothes that would be released in 3 days. They didn't expect that there would be people wearing them to today's banquet, and a group of beautiful girls at that. He looked at the helmet that was glowing with a faint blue light, and it seemed to be glowing even more brightly. This helmet looks pretty cool. Where can I buy it? A young man in the back asked curiously. Is this the current trend? Covering the entire head? A noble woman with a head full of gold and gemstone hair accessories looked thoughtfully at Connie's helmet. She made a mental note to get one custom-made when she got back. Does the banquet have any requirements for the guests' headdress? Meg continued to ask. Esteemed guests, please come in. The waiter bowed slightly in a humble manner. Mag nodded slightly, and continued to walk down the red carpet with the ladies. If we're all family members, then are we family? Amy asked curiously. The women all looked at Meg with a hint of scrutiny, and a few of them had a hint of anticipation in their eyes. Meg nodded with a natural smile. Yes, of course we Amy's family. Yes, that's great, Yarbemia said with a smile. I like the feeling of a family too. Everyone else also smiled. They seemed to be quite satisfied with Meg's answer. Meg breathed a sigh of relief. Although it was for the sake of passing the security check, he still wanted to give himself a thumbs up. After passing through the long corridor, they arrived at the large banquet hall. Countless candles lit up the banquet hall. Everyone was gathered in small circles and chatting. The banquet hadn't started yet. Meg led the women to a slightly secluded corner. This banquet was quite boring. If it weren't for the fact that Gloria and Cyril were going to vote today, he wouldn't have been interested in coming. As he entered, he noticed Cyril standing outside the door. Cyril's green hat was extremely eye-catching, and it was difficult for anyone to ignore him. Compared to Gloria, other than being a man, Cyril was worlds apart from Gloria. In this world, the patriarchal mindset was still deeply rooted. Someone like the Hill, who could become the head of a large family, was an exception. However, Meg was happy to see Gloria become the next head of family Morton. Not only because they were friends, but he also had some selfish motives. Once Gloria became the head of family Morton, whether it was the Hill or Cyril who became the president of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, then the Aden Chamber of Commerce would be different from how it was now. It was equivalent to completing the flag he had set in a curve. The women were curious about the banquet, especially Yarbemia, Gina, Jane, and Raina, who had never attended a banquet like this before. They looked around curiously. Beautiful women were always the focus of attention at banquets, especially when beautiful women gathered together. Even if they were in a corner, they would still be the focus of attention. Mr. Mac, I didn't expect you to come too. And all the beautiful ladies in the restaurant are here too. Are we lucky enough to eat Mr. Mac's food tonight? A voice sounded from the side. Meg turned around and saw the president of the Food Association, Robert, walking over with a glass of red wine. He smiled and said, "What a coincidence to meet President Robert here. I'm just here to sit around today. I'm not in charge of the food." "Oh, that's a pity." Robert felt that it was a pity, but he didn't dwell on this topic. After exchanging some pleasantries with Meg, he was taken away by the others who came up to chat with him. Some of the restaurant's regulars came to greet Meg. Amy's was the most famous restaurant in Chaos City, so it wasn't strange for the members of the Aden Chamber of Commerce to frequent the restaurant. After all, normal people couldn't afford to eat there every day. After the women got Meg's permission, they began to walk around the banquet hall. Amy brought Anna to the buffet area and started to eat without holding back. "I'm warning you. If you try to touch me with your dirty hands again, you will die a horrible death." A cold and annoyed voice sounded from the side. Meg turned around and saw Barbara looking coldly at a blonde youth who was blocking her way. Chapter 1448. Ha! Which family's young mistress are you? I'm asking for your name because I think highly of you. How dare you talk to me like that? Aren't you afraid of being chased out together with your parents? That blonde youth looked at Barbara mockingly. Because he was taller than Barbara by a head, he had a sense of condescension and arrogance. The commotion attracted the attention of the people around them. "Isn't that young Master Roy from the Dodges family? Which family's young mistress is that? How did she offend this devil's incarnate? I heard that young Master Roy likes small girls the most. TSK, isn't that a perverted lolicon? I'm not sure if a lolicon is perverted, but this young master is definitely a pervert. This young mistress is really unlucky to have offended him." Soon, someone recognized that blonde youth's identity and started discussing softly. "Dodge's family?" Meg raised his eyebrows. He wasn't worried that Barbara would be taken advantage of. After all, this princess of the Moon Nation was also a powerful 7th-tier spatial magic caster. Killing this young master with a bad reputation was as easy as killing an ant for her. Instead, he was more worried that Barbara would be too heavy-handed. If she killed someone, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess. Of course, Barbara's identity was many times more honorable than a young master from a business family. However, this world's understanding of the Moon Nation was still at the level of Chang'e flying to the moon. If he claimed that Barbara was the princess of the Moon Nation and applied for an exemption for her, he was afraid that he would be seen as contempt of court and be beaten to death on the spot. Roy looked at the young lady in front of him and couldn't suppress the lust in his heart. This height, this body proportion. It was completely in his zone. He hadn't seen such a cute girl in a long time. Compared to her, his so-called girlfriend was like heaven and earth. Even her angry look made him feel that she was very cute. As one of the 4 young masters of Chaos City and the only heir of the Dodges family, he had never failed to get the girls he wanted. When those girls knew his identity, their eyes would light up. That was his favorite moment. Roy lowered his head to look at Barbara and smiled arrogantly. "Now, I'll give you a chance. Kiss my hand and beg for my forgiveness. As the successor of the Dodges family, I'll consider giving you a chance to forgive your foolish mistake. Kiss your hand and beg for your forgiveness." Barbara looked at Roy's stubby fingers with disgust. Sure enough, not every man's hands were as good-looking as her boss. She wanted to destroy this shameless guy. As for the Dodge's family, what was that? Yes, to be able to kiss such a noble hand like mine is your honor. Roy raised his right hand and shone it under the light. Then, he looked at Barbara with a wretched smile. Of course, if you let me pinch your cheeks, I will let it go. As he said that, Roy reached out his hand and touched Barbara's cheek. He seemed to have already seen this girl's shy look under his pinch. Eat shit, you idiot. Before Roy's hand could touch Barbara's cheek, Barbara had already raised her hand and gave him an uppercut on his chin. The Lolita, who was a head taller than her, was instantly KO'd. Her body flew backward and landed in the middle of the banquet hall 3 meters away. There was an uproar in the banquet hall. The guests all stepped back and looked at Roy, who was sent flying by a punch, in shock. Who dared to provoke this young master at the Aden Chamber of Commerce's year-end banquet? After all, the Dodge's family was one of the founding families of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Roy held his swollen chin. He was in so much pain that tears flowed out. He turned his head and spat out 2 broken teeth. He pointed at Barbara with a sobbing tone, and said, You hit me. If your dirty hands touched me, you would have been dead, Barbara said coldly as she retracted her fist. Who is this girl? She is so fierce. She did what I wanted to do a long time ago. If not for the fear of the Dodge's family's revenge. Someone actually dared to hit young Master Roy. It seems like there will be more than one good show tonight. How lively. Everyone looked at Roy, who was spitting out his teeth, and Barbara, who was not tall but had a strong aura, and started discussing. Oh no, Barbara is in trouble. MIA looked at Barbara, who was in the crowd, and hurriedly walked towards her. Don't worry. That guy can't hurt her. Elizabeth pulled her wrist gently, and said softly, Let's leave this matter to the boss. It's not suitable for us to stand out here. Millimeter. Yarbemia thought for a while, and nodded. Even if she went forward, she really wouldn't know what to do. Jane covered her face in the crowd. She didn't expect her hometown dialect to be used so quickly after Barbara asked her to teach her 2 days ago. However, she looked at Barbara worriedly. Would she cause trouble for beating someone up? Meg nodded with satisfaction when he saw that. She only lost 2 teeth. It was a very reasonable and perfect ending. He tidied his clothes, and prepared to go out to ease the atmosphere before bringing this matter to a close. Roy looked at Barbara, and felt a chill run down his spine. He had a feeling that this fellow wasn't just saying it for fun. However, Roy knew that he had lost all his dignity after being sent flying by a young lady with 1 punch by so many people. Even if he went out with the title of one of the 4 young masters of Chaos City, he would most likely be laughed at. He instantly became frustrated, and shouted, Guards! Guards! Arrest this crazy woman and send her to the Bastille prison. I want her to stay there for the rest of her life. A few guards rushed out from the side and looked at Barbara hesitantly. Although Roy had a distinguished status, this young lady's identity was unknown. Most of the people who could attend this banquet were people they couldn't afford to offend. Roy, my son. What happened to you? At this moment, a fat middle-aged man quickly walked out from the crowd, and came to Roy. He was lying on the ground with half of his face swollen, and blood stains at the corner of his mouth. 2 broken teeth stood out in a mouthful of blood and phlegm on the ground. Roy looked at that fat man with tears flowing down his face. He pointed a finger at Barbara, and cried as he said, Father, that bitch hit me. She knocked my teeth out. You can't let her off. That fat man turned to look at Barbara, and angrily said, Bastard, how dare she hit my son, Harvey? Guards, you bunch of trash. Arrest her and send her to Bastille prison, lock her up for 50 years. Although the guards were a little hesitant, it was Harvey who spoke, so they still surrounded Barbara. You're indeed father and son. Even your words are exactly the same. Right at this moment, Meg walked out from the crowd, and stood in front of Barbara. He looked at Harvey and Roy, and sarcastically said, Does your family own Bastille prison? Do you think you can lock her up for as long as you want? Chapter 1449. Who is this uncle with a bit of a ruffian aura? He's so handsome when he's standing in front of that lady. He's Mr. Mac from Mammoth. Don't you know? It's a restaurant that's super popular recently. Mr. Mac's chicken is delicious. Mr. Mac is as tough as ever. However, he won't be chased out because of this, right? The guests' eyes lit up when they saw Meg stepping forward. Many of them were amused. Many of them couldn't stand the domineering behavior of Harvey and Roy. Everyone was discussing softly, and some ladies even started to form the cutest height difference couple with glowing eyes. How annoying. Wouldn't it be better to just kill this kind of scum? Barbara looked at Meg's back view, and a tinge of frustration flashed across her eyes. She thought for a while, and slowly put down her right hand that was already open. Who are you? How dare you talk to me like that? Harvey looked at Meg with a dark gaze. As the vice president of the Aden Chamber of Commerce and the head of the Dodges family, he had a very high status in Chaos City's business world. When had he ever been mocked in public? Meg smiled, and said, I'm Meg. Chaos City respects freedom of speech. Do I need courage to talk to you? Don't tell me you can raise that fat arm of yours and jump up to hit me on the chin. The banquet hall fell silent for a moment. Everyone looked at the short and fat Harvey, and the banquet hall burst into laughter. Many people turned their heads away, and tried hard to control their expressions. A stern-looking uncle took out a silk handkerchief, and helped the lady opposite him wipe her clothes apologetically. He said, I've been through strict training. No matter how funny it is, I won't laugh. Unless I can't help it. Harvey's face turned green and red. The laughter around him felt like a loud slap to his face. He had never experienced such humiliation before. He clenched his fists, and coldly said to Meg, Kid, you're playing with fire. Playing with fire? Meg smiled. My daughter is very good at playing with fire. If you ask sincerely, I don't mind letting her play with you for a while. You. Harvey pointed at Meg, his hand trembling uncontrollably. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. He looked at Meg and sneered. Do you know how long she will be in prison for the crime of malicious assault? Malicious attack. Meg's face was full of doubt. He looked around at the surrounding guests and asked, May I ask everyone, what happened just now? Wasn't it a weak, pitiful, and innocent little lowly who was facing a tall and fat young master who was trying to molest her and had no choice but to raise her small fists and resist? Meg looked at Harvey again and asked seriously, Do you know how many years he can spend in prison for molesting an underage girl? How many strong men did he have to pick up soap for? As a harboring criminal, don't you have to stay in prison for a period of time? The guests' expressions were a little strange. Although it seemed to be the case at first, and it was indeed Roy who touched Barbara first and tried to take advantage of her. But this girl looked weak, but that was obviously an iron fist. How was she shy? KOing a strong man with a punch. Among the guests present, there were not many who could do that. However, Meg's analysis was reasonable, and he successfully took the moral and legal high ground. The words of picking up soap were even more wonderful. Sure enough, Harvey and his father's faces changed color. They were used to being arrogant, and they were not used to meeting someone who was so tough. Father, I don't want to go to prison. I don't want to pick up soap. Roy grabbed Harvey's sleeve. His face was pale, and he was a little scared. Harvey calmed down a little. He looked at Meg and said, You're talking nonsense. How could my son do anything to her in public? But everyone saw her hitting someone. Don't think that you can distort the truth just because you have a sharp tongue. Many people present can testify for us. You can't run away today. Run? Why should we run? If you think that you can change the truth by relying on numbers, then you're overestimating your influence and the Grey Temple's ability to do things, right? Meg said with a smile. If they were talking about connections, he was really not afraid. After all, he still had a hidden position in the City Lord's castle, and was considered one of them in the system. Harvey looked at Meg, who was unmoved by force or persuasion, and was so angry that his face turned red. However, those few guards were frightened by Meg and did not dare to go forward. They had the mentality of watching from afar, and did not have the slightest intention to help Harvey. Boss is so awesome. He didn't do anything, and he already scared them. Yabemia looked at Meg with glowing eyes. In comparison, he felt that his mouth was fake. Elizabeth was also looking at Mag with approval in her eyes. Even though she was a little surprised by Mag's eloquence, which was a stark contrast to his usual friendly demeanor, it was still a good trait to be tough on outsiders. TSK, seems like I don't even have to do anything. Camilla swirled the red wine in her wine glass at the railing on the second floor, and chuckled. From this angle, Meg was rather good-looking. Wrong. What's wrong with me? Why would I think that men are good-looking? Men are all pigs. They're not good things. Camilla shook her head quickly to get rid of the strange thoughts in her mind. What's going on? At this moment, a sinister voice sounded. The guests parted to create a path for Cyril, who was wearing a bright red robe and a green hat, to make his way in. He took a glance at Mag, and his brows furrowed slightly. What was this guy doing here? Then, his gaze fell on Roy, who was still sitting on the ground with half his face swollen, and Harvey, who was blushing. His expression changed slightly, and he asked, Vice President Harvey, what happened to you? This guy, he's an adult, and he even framed us, saying that he wants to lock us up in Bastille prison, Harvey complained while pointing at Meg. Great, I finally got the chance. Cyril's eyes lit up, and he turned around to look at Meg and Barbara, who was standing behind him. He frowned, and said, You're not from the Aden Chamber of Commerce at all. How did you sneak in? Could it be that you're a thief who sneaked in to freeload? Now, you even dare to maliciously hurt Roy and slander the Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce. Guards, tie the two of them up and send them directly to the Grey Temple. After all, Cyril was the President's son, and had always been seen as the successor of Family Morton. After hearing his order, the guards who were watching at the side could no longer sit still, and surrounded Meg and Barbara. Some of them even took out ropes. Wait. At this moment, a crisp voice sounded from outside the crowd. At the same time, the voice of the MC at the door sounded. Director Gloria has arrived. Chapter 1450. The crowd parted to make a path for Gloria, who was wearing a blue evening gown. She was as elegant and moving as ever, making everyone's eyes light up. The guards stopped in their tracks and looked at Gloria, then looked at Cyril before silently retreating to their original positions. Cyril looked at Gloria, who was walking over, and frowned. He knew that Meg and the others were related to Gloria. He wanted to embarrass them before she arrived so that Gloria would be embarrassed as well, but he didn't expect her to arrive so early. The guests were also looking at Gloria. Everyone knew that the main characters of this year's end-of-year banquet were Gloria and Cyril. The fight between the two of them for the position of Family Morton's successor was gradually becoming more and more intense, and it was possible that the winner would be decided tonight. And now, the show seemed to have arrived early. Gloria came to Meg's side and gave him an apologetic nod. Then she looked at Cyril and said, Uncle Cyril, Mr. Meg and the others from Amy's are my guests. Please don't use the word thief to describe them, it will make you look unreasonable and arrogant. The guests seemed to understand something. So this gentleman was invited by Miss Gloria and the others. It seemed that Cyril's hostility towards them made sense. I'm unreasonable and arrogant. I think it's these so-called guests you invited who are the real arrogant ones. They dared to openly attack Vice President Harvey's son, Roy. Cyril looked at Gloria with a cold smile and said in a somewhat aggressive manner, Gloria, as a director of the Chamber of Commerce, don't you know the rules of the banquet? Before you invited the guests, didn't you properly check their character? I don't think you are a qualified director of the Chamber of Commerce. Upon hearing that, all of the guests began to look at Gloria with a contemplative expression. Although she had already proven that age and status as a woman didn't necessarily represent one's abilities, compared to she, who had displayed astonishing aptitude from a young age, this young Mistress Gloria who had appeared out of nowhere did indeed seem to be lacking in abilities. It was said that a board meeting would be held at today's end-of-year meeting. Cyril had formally proposed a vote to remove Gloria from her position as a board member, and the board of directors had agreed. The current situation made some neutral directors start to seriously examine Gloria. Most of the directors did not know much about this young lady who had suddenly emerged to compete with Cyril for the position of Family Morton's successor. They only knew that she seemed to have established a clothing store that was doing quite well recently. However, $1 million profit was nothing to them. It was not enough to prove that she was capable enough to take on the position of the director of the Aden Chamber of Commerce and the successor of Family Morton. Mr. Meg is the owner and head chef of Immerse. He once won the Best Chef Award at the banquet held by the King of the Roth Empire. He single-handedly raised Chaos City's status among the major cities in the world. He insisted on providing free breakfast for the cleaners every day, and spent a large amount of money to sponsor poor children to go to school. Is there anything wrong with such a kind and gentlemanly person's character? Gloria's gaze landed on Roy, who was still sitting on the floor. She raised her voice, and said, "As for Vice President Harvey's son, Roy, I'm sure all the guests here have heard about his reputation and character. If there is a character threshold for entry into the banquet, he should be the first to be denied entry, right? Why you re-spouting nonsense?" Roy yelled at Gloria angrily. Gloria looked at Roy, and said, "I heard a few days ago that someone ran into a pregnant woman on a horse and caused her to have a miscarriage. After that, the matter was suppressed by a large sum of money and threats, and the Grey Temple was not informed about it. There's such a thing." All the guests' expressions changed. It was a rule that horses were not allowed at the city gates. Running into a pregnant woman and causing her to have a miscarriage was a crime in their eyes. Although Gloria did not mention any names, could this matter really have something to do with Roy? Meg, who had not spoken since Gloria appeared, looked at Gloria with surprise. This lass seemed to have come prepared. Cyril's expression also changed slightly. He looked at Harvey and his son with an uncertain expression. He had not heard of this before. Roy's expression changed, and he stuttered, That's because she was running around on the street." Shut up." Harvey gave him a tight slap across his face, and wished he could slap him back into his mother's womb. He could still talk his way out of this matter, but now, he had confirmed it. He looked at Gloria with a pale face. He had already dealt with this matter very discreetly, so how did she find out? "Looks like the rumor is true. You were the one who ran into the pregnant woman who was about to give birth. You ran on a horse in the middle of the street and caused the death of a pregnant woman, but you did not regret it at all. You even accused the poor mother. You pretended that nothing happened and attended the banquet openly. You even flirted with an underage girl in public. You even accused her after she resisted. Do you know what is righteousness and shame?" Gloria looked at Roy, and her voice was full of anger. Roy's expression was evasive. He subconsciously hid behind Harvey, and did not dare to look at Gloria directly. He's a fucking scumbag. What a pitiful child, what a pitiful mother. This is no different from murder. You can really do whatever you want with money. I can't believe you can cover up this kind of thing. The guests looked at Roy with anger and disdain. Their emotions changed instantly. Gloria turned to Cyril, who had a dark face, and said seriously, "Uncle Cyril, you're defending a murderer who killed a baby and a pervert who flirted with a young girl. You're trying to confuse right and wrong. You're trying to turn the victim into the perpetrator. Is this what you should do as the director of the Aden Chamber of Commerce? Is this what you, as the father of 2 girls, should say? I respect you as an elder, but I advise you to be kind." Cyril opened his mouth. He wanted to defend himself, but his mind was in a mess. This change was completely out of his expectation and plan. He did not know how to deal with it. The guests looked at Cyril with disgust and disgust. Cyril was obviously on Roy's side. Snakes and rats from the same nest. None of them were good people. A few of the older board members shook their heads as they looked at Cyril. Then, their gazes landed on Gloria, and a hint of admiration appeared in their eyes. "This girl, it seems that I don't have to worry about anything. In time, she will be able to compete with Mr. Hill at the same level." Meg also looked at Gloria with admiration. He had changed his mind about the textile and weaving factory. Maybe Gloria would be a more suitable partner. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1451. You. Harvey pointed at Gloria. He wanted to say a few harsh words, but after seeing the disdainful looks he received, his momentum weakened instantly. He snorted coldly, and pulled Roy, who was covering his face with his hands and looking flustered, out quickly. Very good. You're smarter than I expected. Cyril made his way over to Gloria, and lowered his voice as he said, however, all of this is futile. You're going to lose everything tonight. I still like the way you hide in a dark room with a hood on your head. You should stay like that for the rest of your life. Then I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Since I've decided to come out, I won't go back. Gloria smiled and said, besides, I'm different from you. Everything you have is a gift, but everything I have is earned through my own hard work. You can't take it away from me. I hope you can still smile later. Cyril clenched his fists and left angrily. Gloria let out a sigh of relief. Her tense body relaxed, and she realized that her palms were sweaty. This big sister is so beautiful, and she's so righteous. She's super awesome. Sister, she's the boss of Blue Suede. The clothes that the group of girls were wearing are the new clothes that they're about to release. It seems like they're really working with Blue Suede. No wonder they could get the new clothes. The owner is so young. She's so beautiful. The girls looked at Gloria with admiration and amazement. Then, the topic quickly changed to how they could get their hands on Suede's new line. In a private room on the second floor, a white-haired old man chuckled, and said, it seems that the rumors about young Mistress Gloria are a little off. Her ability to adapt and conduct herself on the spot is far superior to Cyril's. Among the younger generation, I haven't seen anyone other than Cyril who can compare to her. Yeah, it looks like the Hill has a rival, just like me and Jeffrey. Ian Buffet also nodded with a smile, and he was also appraising Gloria with an appreciative look in his eyes. At the mention of the past, a hint of nostalgia appeared in his eyes. Gloria's rebuke of Harvey, his son, and Cyril was praised by most of the guests present. After all, many of them were afraid of Harvey and Cyril's status. Even though they had seen what had just happened with their own eyes, they didn't dare to say anything. Gloria turned around and looked at Meg and Barbara. She said apologetically, I'm sorry, Mr. Meg and Miss Barbara. I've made you suffer. Sister Gloria, why are you apologizing? You're not the one at fault. Besides, I've already taught that guy a lesson. Barbara said with a relaxed expression, but her gaze toward Gloria was filled with affection. After all, they had just picked out beautiful new clothes from her shop at noon. Moreover, what she admired most was that Gloria was able to rebuke those guys with words. She had reason and evidence, and she had made everyone stand on their side. Are you interested in joining me? Meg leaned his body towards Camilla and raised his wine glass as a cover as he said softly. Kill who? Camilla was instantly interested. Caster, an information dealer. His people have been loitering around the restaurant recently. He should be here for Connie. Meg used the glass to point to the right. There was a middle-aged man in a tight purple suit. An unchallenging target. Camilla only glanced at that person before looking away in boredom. Before I kill him, I need to get some useful information from him. So, we need to find a little dark room. A little dark room. Camilla's eyes instantly lit up and showed an eager expression again. I'm good at this. Chapter 1452. Caster was flirting with a blonde, and stroking his short beard habitually with his right hand. However, he was secretly sizing up Connie, who was squatting in a corner and drawing circles. Although her head was completely covered by the helmet, that frail and petite figure gradually matched with that princess in his memory. After this period of investigation, he could basically confirm that this employee of Amy's who never showed her face was Princess Connie of the Fork tribe. As an outstanding information provider, his information network was all over the Norland continent, and he had friends all over the world. His motto was that as long as he had the money, there was no information that he couldn't get, and no person that he couldn't find. Before the Fork tribe fell into chaos, he had also provided Gary with a series of information, including the living habits of all the former chief's family members, so as to ensure that Gary's men would be able to capture or kill everyone accurately during the operation. Gary's rebellion was very successful. The chief and his wife were killed on the spot, and his children and supporters were also captured or killed. If that little girl hadn't escaped, this operation would have been another masterpiece on his resume that he could boast about. Unfortunately, the chief forcefully created a way out for her before he died, and allowed her to escape all the way from the Twilight Forest to Chaos City. She also successfully shook off the orcs who were chasing after her. In order to erase this flaw, he came to Chaos City personally, and finally locked onto his target after laying low for half a month. He hadn't found a chance to make his move previously, but he didn't expect to meet her at this banquet today. It was a pretty good opportunity. Gary would officially ascend the throne a few days later. If he could capture Connie and send her to him, it would definitely bring him a sizable income. "Connie, come with me for a while," Meg said as he stood up and walked to Connie and patted her shoulder gently. "Huh." As she couldn't eat while wearing the helmet, and it felt weird to talk to people, Connie, who could only squat in the corner and draw circles in boredom, looked up. She quickly stood up and followed after Meg when she saw him walking out. Leaving, Caster watched as Connie walked to the side door. He smiled at the blonde girl he was talking to and signaled that he needed to leave. He walked to the side door quietly. If he could catch her alone, tonight's banquet would be over for him. This guy really isn't a good person. Camilla's gaze turned cold as she watched Caster follow Meg and the others out. She put down the wine glass in her hand and walked towards the side door unhurriedly. "Boss, where are we going? Aren't you going to wait in the banquet hall?" Connie asked softly as she walked behind Meg. "We need to find a small dark room now," Meg said calmly. "Little black room." Connie's expression immediately tensed up, and she couldn't help but slow down a little. She looked at Meg's back nervously and cautiously, and said, "Boss, don't do that. I'm not that kind of person." Meg stopped and turned back to look at Connie. He suddenly realized that this girl was probably thinking the wrong way. He held her helmet with one hand and led her forward as he said, "Someone is following us. We need to find a small dark room to catch him and see what he's going to do." "Is that so?" Connie wanted to turn her head and look behind her. "Don't turn back in case he suspects something." Meg put his hand on Connie's shoulder and raised a finger to press against her helmet to prevent her from turning back. "Oh," Connie responded and stopped moving, allowing Meg to lead her forward. What are they going to do? The banquet is about to start, but they're walking around at this time. Could there be some unspeakable secret between them? Caster hid in the darkness and looked at the two people who disappeared at the stairs of the long corridor. He had a puzzled expression on his face. After waiting for a while, he quickly followed. The second floor was the office area of the Aiden Chamber of Commerce. Everyone was at the banquet hall now, and the office area was pitch black without a single person. It was a good opportunity to make a move. Caster came to the stairs and listened carefully. After making sure that no one was on the stairs, he walked up softly. He pulled out the dagger at his waist with his right hand and looked a little vigilant. He had the strength of a 6th-level knight, and it was more than enough to deal with Princess Connie. That princess had never cultivated before, so she was just a helpless little chick in front of him. Caster came to the staircase on the second floor. He leaned against the wall and listened carefully for a while. Faint footsteps came from the corridor on the right. He slowly poked his head out of the wall and looked in the direction of the corridor. The corridor appeared in his sight, followed by a huge black shadow. He judged that it was a huge club 1 second before he fainted. Bam! With a muffled sound, Camilla looked at the unconscious Caster on the ground and casually struck the black club in her hand on the ground. She clapped her hands in satisfaction and said, "Done." Meg walked over from the corridor with Connie. He looked at the black club in Camilla's hand and raised his eyebrows. He was also a victim of this black club. Speaking of which, Camilla was indeed very good at sneaking up on people. "Is he dead?" Meg lifted his leg and kicked Caster. "No. How could a professional like me kill him with just one hit?" Camilla shook her head as if it was a matter of course. "That's good." Meg reached out and grabbed Caster's collar. He dragged him to the end of the corridor and pushed open the door to the storeroom. After the three of them went in, he closed the door again. This was obviously a small room for storing stuff. There were walls on all sides, and it was airtight. It was very suitable for Meg's requirements for a small dark room. Camilla raised her hand to set up a soundproof barrier. At the same time, she took out 2 night-luminescent pearls and slapped them on the wall. The small dark room lit up instantly. Connie took off his helmet and leaned in to look at Castor. He frowned slightly. Why do I feel that this person looks a little familiar? I remember now. He was by Gary's side during the previous banquet. So he took part in the rebellion too. During Gary's rebellion, he played the role of providing information, Meg said softly. Bastard. I'm going to kill him. Sharp claws shot out from Connie's fingertips, and he was about to stab Castor's heart. We need to get some information from him. It won't be too late to kill him after we're done. Meg reached out and grabbed Connie's wrist. He then looked at Camilla and said, How do we wake him up? It's simple. As long as it hurts enough. Camilla lifted her hard and thin heel and stepped on Castor's crotch. Chapter 1453. Oh, Castor almost jumped up from the ground, but before he could close his mouth, a rope was wrapped around his body. With a forceful pull, he was tied to the bamboo in the corner. The pain in his crotch made him draw in a cold breath, and his mind went blank. Meg, who was standing at the side, retracted his leg instinctively. He was suddenly glad that Camilla didn't use this method to wake him up. Otherwise, the story would have gone in a different direction. Tell me, which way do you want to die? Camilla asked coldly as she took out a set of leather whips and candles. She raised her hand and whipped Castor's face, leaving a deep bloody mark on his face. Castor was jolted awake by this whip. Although his crotch was in excruciating pain, he still clamped his legs and tried to look at Camilla. He panicked and hurriedly said, Countess Bartoli, this must be a misunderstanding. Smack. Camilla didn't waste her breath. She whipped him again. Castor grimaced in pain from the whipping. That whip was full of barbs, and every whip brought down a string of flesh. The pain was imaginable. You're here for me, aren't you? Connie said to Castor with clenched fists as she walked up to him. Miss, may I know who you are? There might be some misunderstanding between us. Castor looked at Connie and tried to force a smile while enduring the pain. His heart had already sunk to the bottom, and his brain was spinning rapidly. He didn't expect to fall into someone else's hands today. Liar, you're obviously Gary's lackey. I saw you standing with Gary at the Fork Tribe's banquet with my own eyes. You're the ones who killed my father, mother, and my family. Connie punched Castor's chin, and a few of his teeth flew out. Cough, cough. Castor coughed out 2 mouthfuls of blood, and looked at Connie innocently. Seems like you've got the wrong person. I don't know you, and I don't know any Gary. I'm just an ordinary merchant. Please let me go. I have parents and children to take care of. You. Connie looked at Castor with hesitation. Did she really get the wrong person? Cast, nicknamed Vulture, from Donsona town in the Roth Empire. He fled the empire in his early years because he killed his wife in a drunken stupor. After that, he traveled the continent and became an intelligence merchant. He also built a huge intelligence network on the Norland continent that covered all the races. He made a lot of money by selling intelligence and information. Vulture is very mysterious, and very few people know what he looks like. It's said that he had changed his appearance many times, and is no longer the same as before. Mag looked at Castor with a smile, and said, How many more skins are hidden under this skin? Castor stared at Mag with a deadly gaze. His stiff face was twitching, and there was fear in his eyes. Just as he had guessed, this fellow wasn't a simple chef and restaurant owner. However, from the looks of it now, he might not have the chance to find out his identity completely. Mag saw that Cast had silently agreed to his words, so he continued with a smile, If you tell me how you helped Gary plot the rebellion and killed the chief of the Fork tribe, I might be able to let you die a quick death. Since I'm going to die for sure, why am I still talking to you? Is your brain kicked by a donkey? Caster sneered at Meg. Are you trying to help her take back the chief's position? Ha, let me tell you. You won't succeed. Gary has already controlled the Fork tribe. What do you have to fight with him? Smack. Camilla's whip landed on him again, and tore off a piece of flesh along with his clothes. Caster was trembling from the pain. Interrogation was one of the things he was best at. However, he never thought that he would be tied up one day, and a whip with barbs would land on him. Don't talk so much nonsense. Otherwise, I'll use the whip to whip you slowly to death. According to this efficiency, I'll probably need another 1001 lashes to remove all the flesh on your body. But you'll still be conscious at that time, so you can't die even if you want to. I'll use the healing potion to heal your injuries and do it all over again. Camilla looked at Caster with a smile, and her eyes sparkled with eagerness. You can't do this to me. Caster broke down instantly. He struggled to move, but he got another 2 lashes in return. The intense pain came from his wounds. Caster swayed left and right, but he couldn't break free from the ropes on his body. I'll tell you everything. Seeing Camilla raise her whip again, Caster cried out in a sobbing tone. Smack. The whip still landed on Caster's body, and tore off a piece of flesh from his thigh. I'm sorry. I didn't expect you to be so useless. You can't even last 3 seconds, Camilla apologized without any sincerity. The whip was hanging by her side, and she had no intention of putting it away. Caster grimaced in pain, but he didn't dare to say anything. His gaze landed on Connie, and he said, Yes, I helped Gary plan that coup. I killed the chief and his wife of the Fork tribe, as well as all the orcs who supported the chief. I was the one who provided Gary with all the information so that he could kill all the orcs who could lead and change this coup with the highest efficiency in the shortest time possible. And you were the only accident in this plan. If you didn't run away, I would be sitting in the Fork tribe's palace now, calling Gary my brother, and becoming the Fork tribe's most distinguished guest. Caster clenched his teeth, and roared at Connie, Why did you run away? You ought to have died with your damned father. What right do you have to live alone? Connie took 2 steps back instinctively. Her eyes were filled with sorrow and pain. She shook her head and stepped back, not wanting to recall what happened that day. You're not the one in the wrong. Right at this moment, a hand pressed gently on her back to stop her from retreating body. Mag said gently, Don't worry about it. But father was killed because of me. Connie's tears couldn't stop flowing. She couldn't forget the scene when her father pushed her out of the palace and used his body to block the door. If it weren't for her, her father might have been able to leave. Endless self-reproach surged in her heart. Seeing you survive is your father's greatest consolation. Meg shook his head. He pointed at Caster, and seriously said, Killing these bad people, avenging your parents, and saving your brother is what you should be doing next. If you can't even withstand the enemy's verbal attacks, what right do you have to go back? Wonderful book house. Chapter 1454. The door to the little dark room closed slowly, and everything in the room returned to its original state. Apart from a puddle of water that was drying up in the corner, the cleaners wouldn't notice anything unusual when they came to retrieve the tools tomorrow. Boss, how did you know that he knew where my brother was locked up? Connie kept the hand-drawn map in her pocket, and pressed Mag down with a bewildered expression. She already knew what she had to do next when her sharp claws pierced into that bastard's heart. Firstly, we can't be sure if this map is real. This could also be a trap set by him after he knew he couldn't escape today, so we can only believe half of it. Secondly, what he said just now is the real purpose of our trip. If our rescue operation can succeed and overthrow Gary's rule, the things in this photostone will be the evidence of Gary's crimes, and can help you win the hearts of the people quickly. Meg tossed the photostone in his hand to Connie. This pervert indeed has a photostone with him all the time. Camilla looked at the photostone that Connie caught, and was even more certain of her thoughts. Meg didn't mind Camilla's gaze. He looked at Connie, and said, However, since even he could recognize you based on your body shape, I'm afraid you can't go with us even if we obtain the legal identity to go to the Fork tribe. Once you're recognized, the operation will fail. Millimeter HM. Connie nodded. Let's go. The banquet is about to start. Meg went downstairs first, and music could already be heard from the banquet hall. The Chamber of Commerce's year-end banquet was naturally full of flattery. First, the 4 major families that founded the Aden Chamber of Commerce were lavishly praised. Then, a few separate awards were given to the businessmen who had made great progress in the past year. The atmosphere was rather lively. Meg sat in a corner and watched this scene with interest. He recalled when he was young, snuggled in his mother's arms, and sat in the front row to watch his family's company's year-end banquet. At that time, the company was not big and there were no celebrities. His father would go on stage and sing with the employees. It was not very exciting, but it was humane and the employees were the main characters. Later on, the venue became bigger. The various lights on the stage were the same as a concert stage, and A-list singers were invited. Although it was lively, the end-of-year celebration did not seem to have much to do with the employees. Therefore, he did not attend it again. Father, do you want to try this fruit? It's sweet and sour. It's super delicious. After eating it, your teeth will turn purplish red. Amy ran over to Meg with a small fruit platter. She grinned, revealing a mouthful of purplish red teeth stained by the fruit juice. Look at your purplish red teeth. Meg smiled. Then, he looked at the pea-sized purplish black fruits in the small fruit platter. They looked a little like blueberries. Before he reached out, Amy had already grabbed one and tiptoed to feed it to him. Meg opened his mouth and took the small fruit. With a light bite, the thin fruit skin burst open, and the sweet and sour taste bloomed. The texture and taste were between grapes and blueberries, and it was indeed quite delicious. Is it delicious? Amy asked expectantly. Yes, it's sweet and sour. It's really delicious. Meg smiled and nodded. He reached out and patted Amy's head. Go and play. Don't run around and don't bump into others. Yes, yes. Then I'll leave this fruit platter here for you to eat. Amy nodded obediently and placed the small fruit platter on the table in front of Meg. Then, she skipped away. Little one. Meg's gaze followed Amy the whole time. He knew that she had met up with the children. Gina had already become the children's temporary playmate. She was playing with the group of children who had followed their parents to attend the banquet. It was obvious that she really liked children. Camilla sat across from Meg and looked at him as she asked in a low voice, "Let's make a deal. What do you want in order for you to stop pestering my Miss Gloria? There's nothing between us." "You can't talk nonsense and ruin our reputation," Meg said calmly as he tossed a fruit into his mouth. "Do you think I'll believe you if you say that?" Camilla rolled her eyes. "It's up to you to believe it or not. If you like her, then go after her. If you don't even have the courage to do that, then what's the point of attacking an imaginary enemy? If you don't know how, then beg me to teach you," Meg said with a smile. "Chemph. Who needs you to teach me? She's going to be my woman sooner or later." Camilla snorted and turned her face away. She did want to pursue her, but her previous actions seemed to have scared Gloria. Not only did it not have any positive effects, it even seemed to be pushing Gloria towards Meg. Although she turned her face away, she couldn't help but glance in Meg's direction. She thought to herself, this fellow is a little perverted, but he does seem to be quite attractive to women. Could it be that he really has some secret trick? If I learn it, will I be able to change Miss Gloria's opinion of me? Thank you to all the members of the Chamber of Commerce for your support and contributions to the Aden Chamber of Commerce in the past year. You've allowed the Aden Chamber of Commerce to enjoy a good reputation on the Norland continent. I also wish all of you a prosperous new year. As the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Geoffrey concluded the commendation banquet with a speech. Warm applause rang out from below the stage. Most of the members of the Chamber of Commerce were glowing with pride. Geoffrey was ready to leave the stage after his speech. "President, please wait." After Gloria retracted her gaze, he glanced at Camilla from the corner of his eyes. This maiden was so easily flattered. 2 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. All of the board members had already received their pens and papers, and everyone's eyes fell on Gloria. Gloria withdrew her gaze from Meg's warm smile, and felt as if her heart was filled with courage and strength. She bowed slightly to all of the board members and guests present, and then said, "Esteemed board members and members of the Chamber of Commerce, I am Gloria Morton. I am very honored to be a substitute board member of the Aden Chamber of Commerce a month ago. As the former board member was arrested for breaking the law, the substitute board member's qualifications were revoked. According to the rules, as long as the substitute board member is approved by the president, there is no need for the board to vote, so there is no violation of the rules. During my time as a board member of the Chamber of Commerce, I have felt a lot of responsibility and pressure. The Aden Chamber of Commerce gathers the best businessmen and companies in Chaos City, but it is not only a platform to promote cooperation between businessmen, but also a series of social responsibilities. We have a huge amount of wealth in our hands, so we naturally have to bear the corresponding social responsibilities, and the Chamber of Commerce plays a role in guiding and promoting all of this. During the mid-year meeting, Miss Luna from Chaos School launched a fund to provide education and living assistance for the children who can't go to school, and it received the approval of many people in the Chamber of Commerce. Suede donated a portion of the funds for the construction of the children's school buildings, and also prepared winter clothes for the children. When I saw the pure smiles on the children's faces after putting on the new clothes, I was very touched. To us, this is just a basic living condition, but to them, it is a luxury. The reason I want to become a board member of the Chamber of Commerce is that I want to guide more businessmen to help the children and the poor, so that the residents who are struggling to survive can have a basic living condition. Chapter 1456. I hope that as the Aden Chamber of Commerce grows stronger, it will become warmer and take on more responsibilities. This is the reason why I want to continue being a board member of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Gloria bowed slightly, and ended her speech. The 3-minute speech wasn't long, but it made all the guests stop smiling and fall into deep thought. Warmth. Responsibility. Businessmen are born for profit. If they have these two things, they won't be businessmen anymore. Cyril smirked at Gloria. Only a young lady like her would take such an immature idea seriously, and even say it on such an occasion. This lass still takes after her father. Geoffrey looked at Gloria with a complicated look in his eyes. Meg looked at Gloria thoughtfully. The vision and plan that she had shown had already gone beyond the scope of just wanting to prove herself in front of Geoffrey. It was a moving plan and long-term goal. This Miss Gloria has a sense of responsibility that is rare among businessmen. If she can become the successor of Family Morton, or even the president of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, she could bring more things to Chaos City. In the VIP seats, Michael looked at Gloria with admiration. Does the City Lord mean to help Miss Gloria stay in the board of directors? An official at the side asked softly. Let's do our best to help her. As for whether she can stay, that will depend on her ability. Michael nodded slightly. Yes. That official left quickly. Soon, a waiter walked between the tables of the directors and passed a few small notes without batting an eyelid. Interesting. Hill was also staring at Gloria. An opponent like her would become even more interesting in a few years' time. As for Cyril, she had never seen him as an opponent. However, why does the way she speaks sound more and more like someone? Hill's gaze swept across the crowd and landed on Meg, who was sitting in the corner. His eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, it was him. Menard came up to the stage again. He looked at the directors and said loudly, "Miss Gloria's speech is over. Now, the directors have 3 minutes to think and choose. Write down on the paper whether you agree with Miss Gloria continuing to be a director of the Chamber of Commerce. After 3 minutes, the staff will collect all the votes and check the votes on the spot to get the final result." The directors looked at each other, picked up a pen and paper one after another, and wrote down their choice on the paper. This vote seemed sudden, but most of the directors had already made their choice before they came to the venue. This wasn't just a vote. It also meant that the battle team would win. Although the Dodges family and the Marquis family were not as powerful as the family Morton and the Buffett family in recent years, they still had a lot of influence. The number of seats on the board of directors decreased year by year. On family Morton's side, Cyril had visited almost all of the family's directors. He had used both kindness and authority, and his influence was not small. As for the Buffett family, no one knew what choice Mrs. Hill would make, but no one thought that she would side with Gloria. "Will Sister Gloria win?" Amy asked a little nervously. She had returned to Meg's side at some point and was nestled in Meg's arms. "Maybe." Her speech was so moving. Meg smiled and nodded. "A kind heart was the most beautiful." "Mph, that's my girl." Camilla snorted in warning and muttered to herself. The other people in the restaurant had also returned to Meg's side. After all, Miss Gloria had invited them to the banquet. They were like her family and friends, so of course they would stand on her side. "Do you think Gloria can continue to be a director?" Deborah asked Lance, clenching her fists nervously. "Don't worry. Even if she can't continue to be a director, it's not a big deal. She's a kind child. No matter what she does, she'll succeed." Lance gently put his hand on her shoulder and smiled. He looked at Gloria with gratification. "Big sister is the best. I also believe in her." Mickey clenched his fists and said with a serious expression. 3 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. Under Menard's signal, the staff began to collect the voting slips written by the directors. Although Gloria's expression was calm, her hands were already clenched into fists. She stared nervously at the ballot box that was being brought up to the stage by the staff. "It's time for the unveiling. You should go back to where you belong." Cyril sneered beside Gloria. He seemed to be certain of his victory. Gloria didn't reply. She remained silent. When she visited the directors, she was given the cold shoulder and received a lot of excuses. Almost no one agreed to stand on her side on the spot. Compared to Cyril, who had been in the Chamber of Commerce for more than 20 years, it was difficult for her to gain the trust of the directors. He couldn't be sure of the results tonight. He could only hope that some of the directors would change their opinions of her and stand on her side because of her short speech. "Now, let's invite all the guests here to be witnesses. I will read the votes on the spot." Menard walked to the ballot box and reached into it. He pulled out a ballot and opened it. Then, he said loudly, "The first ballot, disagree." A staff member drew a horizontal line on the blackboard at the side. "The second ballot, disagree." "The third ballot, disagree." "The fourth ballot, abstain." "The fifth ballot, agree." "The sixth ballot, disagree." Menard's voice was steady as he read the votes. There was a clear difference between the agree and disagree sections on the blackboard. The hall was silent. Everyone stared at the blackboard with different expressions. "Haha, you're still too inexperienced to fight with me." Cyril's smile became more and more arrogant. If this continued, he would win the bet with an absolute advantage. "Ha, how dare you humiliate me in this kind of place? Let's see how long you can be arrogant. When family Morton falls." Harvey looked at Gloria coldly. Everything was going according to their plan. How could a little girl be a match for their two big families? When the disagree votes reached 23, there were only 5 agree votes. It was a crushing advantage. It made people feel a little depressed. The guests looked at Gloria with pity. Such a beautiful and kind girl couldn't continue to be a director and was impeached by Cyril. The 29th ballot, agree. The 30th ballot, agree. The 40th ballot, agree. With 12 agree votes in a row, Menard couldn't help but raise his voice. The eyes of the guests lit up again. It didn't seem to be over. This is impossible. Cyril, who thought that victory was in his hands and wanted to find someone to celebrate with, widened his eyes. He suddenly became nervous. A childish cheer erupted from the corner. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw Amy nestled in Meg's arms, covering half of her face in embarrassment. Then their eyes lit up. What a cute little girl. 31:31. The suspense was raised again. All the results were hidden in the last ticket in the box. The last vote. Menord reached into the box, grabbed the ticket, and slowly pulled it out. Everyone's eyes followed his hand closely, and they couldn't help but hold their breaths. Disapproving. Disapproving. It must be disapproving. Cyril muttered in his heart. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. After getting Bowen and Harvey's promise to join forces with them, it was tantamount to a formal declaration of war against his father. It meant that Geoffrey had no choice but to let him inherit family Morton after he removed Gloria from her position as the family's successor. But if Gloria wasn't removed from her position as a director today, then his wishful thinking would be completely ruined. Not only would his position in the Aden Chamber of Commerce plummet, but he also wouldn't know how to face Geoffrey. Cyril is an idiot. He definitely didn't ask the directors under family Morton to vote for him. If he loses today's vote, then all of his plans will be for naught. Bowen's face darkened, and he began to plan for the worst. 67th vote, agreed. Menord calmly announced the result of the last vote. That's great. It's a happy result. A burst of cheers erupted from the crowd, and smiles appeared on the faces of many of the guests. Compared to those board members who held high positions but did nothing but bully normal members like them, young Mistress Gloria was clearly more popular among them. Amy's and the others also smiled. She won by a margin of 1 vote, but in the end, she still won. It's just as I expected. Meg sat back in his chair and heaved a sigh of relief. He revealed an expression that said he had already expected it. That uncle with the green hat's face has turned black. Amy pointed at Cyril with a smile. In the corner of the banquet hall, Mars clenched his fists tightly. Although he was trying his best to control his emotions, he couldn't hide the excitement on his face. Perhaps this was a sign that Gloria had really entered the upper class of Chaos City's business circle, and also a brand new step for him. That's great. Deborah jumped into Lance's arms. Yes, Gloria won. Lance hugged Deborah and wiped her tears with a silk handkerchief as he smiled. Meanwhile, Mickey was already jumping up and down excitedly. Geoffrey, you have a good granddaughter, Michael said to Geoffrey with a smile. I've embarrassed myself in front of the city lord, Geoffrey said calmly, but there was a hint of relief in his eyes as he looked at Gloria. At least this lass didn't embarrass him too much today, and also saved his family Morton from being invaded by the Dodges family and the Marquis family. The voting results are 32 in favor, 31 against, and 4 abstentions. Menord looked at Gloria at the side, and loudly said with a smile, "Congratulations, Miss Gloria. According to the voting results, you will continue to be a board member of the Chamber of Commerce until the next board member election." A round of applause broke out in the banquet hall. Everyone was smiling as they looked at Gloria. Today, all the members had witnessed Gloria officially becoming a board member of the Chamber of Commerce. It wasn't because of her identity as the president's granddaughter, but because she was a young and outstanding businesswoman. Her unique way of thinking and actions had gained the approval of most people. No. This must be fake. There must be something wrong with this vote. Cyril rushed forward, and hysterically said, "I request for a recheck of the vote. Revote. Cyril, get down here right now." Geoffrey slammed the table and stood up. He glared at Cyril angrily. "Where do you think you are? How can you behave so atrociously?" This vote was carried out in front of the city lord and all the members of the Chamber of Commerce. Do you think you can deny it by behaving atrociously? If you continue to cause trouble, I will remove your board member title according to the rules of the board today. Chapter 1458. Hearing Geoffrey's words, Cyril shuddered and came back to his senses. If he was stripped of his position as a director, it meant that Geoffrey had completely abandoned him, and he would be removed from the list of successors. This was something that he absolutely couldn't accept. His gaze fell on the people below the stage, who used to flatter him. At this moment, They couldn't hide their disappointment and disgust. His heart sank to the bottom. Cyril smiled awkwardly and said, "Sorry, I was impulsive. It seems that everyone agrees with Gloria. As her uncle, I'm very happy about this. I also hope that she can become a director of the Chamber of Commerce and make more contributions to the Chamber of Commerce." Cyril's beautiful words didn't receive a positive response. Instead, there was a burst of whispers in the banquet hall. Gloria smiled at Cyril and said, "Thank you, Uncle Cyril, for dispelling everyone's misunderstanding of me. I also hope that you can do something for the children with me. I'll donate 1,000,000 copper coins to the foundation today for the construction of the school building." Cyril's expression looked like he had eaten shit, but he still nodded and said. Gloria continued to smile and said, "Then I'll thank you on behalf of the children. Later, I'll ask Mars to help you with the donation. He's in charge of the connection between the Suede and the foundation, so he's more familiar with this aspect. You just need to give him the invoice, and he'll help you with it." "Okay." Cyril nodded with a dark expression, then he turned around and quickly walked off the stage. Today was a great humiliation for him. He lost both his wife and his soldiers. The problem he had to consider now was not how to remove Gloria, but how to restore his position in Jeffrey's heart. Gloria wasn't in a hurry to step down from the stage. She wasn't too excited about winning the vote either. Instead, she said sincerely, "Thank you all for voting for me. I accept this result with both surprise and fear. However, taking advantage of the end-of-year meeting, I would like to appeal for the children who haven't been admitted to school yet. The students of Chaos School were going to have their holidays soon, which meant that a new semester was coming soon. There were at least 50,000 school-age children in Chaos City who couldn't go to school, and with the funds raised by the foundation and the expansion of Chaos School, they could only accommodate 5,000 new students, and there was still a huge shortage of teachers. Those children who could not enter school, unless they had outstanding talent, most of them could only do the most basic physical labor because they did not study. This was unfair to them. If the members of the Aiden Chamber of Commerce are interested in providing assistance to these children, you can directly look for Teacher Luna or me. I hope that we can do our part to help more children enter the school like your children, gain knowledge, and change their destiny." Applause rang out in the banquet hall for a long time, and people whispered to each other about the donation. "Thank you." Gloria bowed to everyone before gracefully making her way down the stage. Soon, there were businessmen who came forward to talk to her. Mars had a notebook and a pen in his hands as he followed beside Gloria, jotting down a name and a sum of money in his notebook from time to time. Count Abraham sat in the VIP area, and sighed as he looked at Gloria, and said, "I've never seen someone like you who would speak up for the education of children in our Roth Empire. Father once said that normal people don't need to be too smart. If they're too smart, they'll be difficult to manage. And those who think they're smart are even more troublesome," Vanessa whispered. After a short pause, she continued, "I don't think that's right." Abraham nodded with a smile, and said, "Those guys think they're smart. I'll just kill a bunch of them from time to time, and that's all. The rest of them are just a bunch of clowns. However, I don't think it's a bad thing to make more people smarter. The truly smart people are civilized. They know the law and abide by etiquette, and they'll maintain order spontaneously, just like most of the people in Chaos City. Know the law and abide by etiquette." Vanessa was deep in thought. After a while, she looked at Abraham, and asked, "Then, Uncle Abraham, why don't you suggest to Father to change? His Majesty naturally has his own thoughts. Perhaps what he thinks is right." Abraham shook his head with a smile. He picked up an exquisite pastry and put it into his mouth. After chewing, he said, "I like to eat, drink, and play. I'm just spouting nonsense about other things. Who do you think will believe me? Big brother Sean and big brother Josh don't know how to do that?" Vanessa asked. "Sean is more like your father, while Josh is more interested in magic than education. They also like obedient people who aren't very smart." Abraham smiled, and said, "You know, interacting with smart people is more tiring than interacting with foolish people." Vanessa looked at Abraham with a confident smile, and said, "I believe in you, Uncle Abraham." A civilized empire built by smart people is the future of the Roth Empire. Abraham paused in his chewing and looked up at Vanessa with a hint of surprise in his eyes. However, he quickly tossed the remaining half of the pastry into his mouth and said with a relaxed smile, "You can say that in Chaos City, but don't say it when you're back in Rodu. Especially not to His Majesty. Otherwise, he'll definitely accuse me of bringing you to Chaos City and teaching you bad things." Vanessa smiled and said, "Father said that women shouldn't be involved in politics, and I'm not interested in politics, either. However, I think it's good for children to study. After returning to Rodu, I've decided to set up a school so that more children from ordinary families can study." Abraham's eyes lit up, and he nodded as he said, "I think that's a good idea. If you want to set up a school, I'll support you. I'll provide the land and money, and you can build as big a school as you want." "Then, Uncle, are you going to set up a school with me? How can I do that? Wouldn't I be stealing your limelight?" Abraham waved his hand with a smile and said, "I'll just stay in Chaos City and eat hot pot and skewers. I'll just barely make a living." "Uncle, that's too much." Vanessa looked at Abraham with a sulky expression, and her enthusiasm for returning to Rodu to contribute to the education industry was instantly extinguished. You see, I'm old. How can an old man like me travel back and forth?" Abraham said with a matter-of-fact expression. Meg was invited to Michael's private room. There was only Michael in the private room. Michael looked at Mag, who just came in, and smilingly said, "Boss Mag, I have to inform you of something. If everything goes well, the Fork Tribe's messenger will arrive at Chaos City tomorrow and invite you to the Twilight Forest to be in charge of cooking the dishes for Gary's coronation banquet." Chapter 1459. Meg and the rest left the banquet early and returned to the restaurant. Irina happened to be back too. Because they didn't have much to eat at the banquet, everyone had a new meal. They had hot pot, crayfish, skewers, spicy grilled fish, and cold beer. The banquet officially began. Compared to the high-end banquet where everyone carries themselves, I still prefer to eat the boss's delicious food in the restaurant and have fun with everyone, Yarbemia said with a smile as she took a bite of beef. "I also think Father's food is the most delicious in the world," Amy said with a nod as she held a crayfish in one hand. "Did anything interesting happen at the banquet?" Irina asked with a smile as she took a sip of beer. "Miss Gloria, who often comes to our restaurant, was super awesome at the banquet today." Phyllis told Irina about the voting incident at the banquet with an interesting expression. The sumptuous supper ended with everyone burping in satisfaction. "Boss, you all rest early. We've decided to form a group and go to the north of the city to play for a while before going back to sleep." Yarbemia waved at Meg, and the group of ladies left happily while humming a tune. "I wonder what kind of scenery the Gentleman League will bring to the north of the city tonight." Meg closed the restaurant's door with a smile. He had something to do tonight, so he wouldn't be attending the Gentleman League's first team-building activity personally. "Oh no, ugly duckling. I feel like I'm going to become as fat as you." Amy touched her slightly bulging tummy and looked at Ugly Duckling with a melancholy expression. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling looked at her and meowed, but its eyes were fixed on the half-eaten crayfish in its plate. "You don't have to eat anymore. You'll get fat if you eat anymore." Amy squatted down and confiscated the half-eaten crayfish in its bowl. "Meow." Ugly Duckling looked at Amy in confusion. "It only ate half of the crayfish, I don't care. Go and run 10 laps around the restaurant now." Amy pointed to the side. "Meow." Ugly Duckling shrank back a little. "I don't think I'm the one who ate too much. I don't care what you think, I want what I think. Listen to me, there's no need to discuss this. You have to run 10 laps around the restaurant. Listen to me, I call the shots," Amy said with a serious face. "Meow meow cat." Ugly Duckling was dumbfounded. "Okay, you can start now. Remember to bring my share with you," Amy instructed as she sat down on a stool. Although it was a little reluctant, Ugly Duckling still started to run around the restaurant under Amy's gaze. "If we keep running at this speed, I'm going to fall asleep. Irina made her way to Amy's side, and pointed a finger at Ugly Duckling, upon which a furry green ball appeared behind it before quickly rolling toward it. Meow! Ugly Duckling was instantly enraged. It turned into a blur and ran frantically around the restaurant. It finished 10 laps in the blink of an eye, and then jumped into Amy's arms. It poked its head out of her down jacket and looked around carefully. Hey, Ugly Duckling. Look at you. You're usually so lazy, but you run quite fast, Amy said with disdain as she carried it upstairs. The two little fellows were washing up in the bathroom. Meg looked at Irina and asked, "How's the arrangement with the night elves?" "The new dormitory has been built according to the style you built for them previously. However, it's all made of wood. It doesn't look big, but it's big enough to accommodate people. They've all moved in." Irina nodded. "I spent 100 million to buy a piece of land from the City Lord's castle. We can build houses or factories on it. I also bought a piece of land outside the city for farming." "You're really generous." Meg chuckled. However, since the issue of accommodation and land had been settled, these elves could finally settle down in Chaos City. The textile factory had already started operations. As the production increased, the factory's revenue would also increase rapidly. As long as there was a steady flow of water, it would be able to ensure the basic livelihood of these 20,000 elves. However, there were 20,000 elves in the Night Elves now, so the textile factory didn't need so many people. Hence, the other factories could also start production so that these laborious could be used effectively, and they could also be paid for to obtain more happiness. Is the City Lord's castle willing to give them the legal status of Chaos City's residents? Meg asked. The City Lord's castle's request is that they can apply for legal status as long as they can get a fixed job. Irina nodded. The conditions that City Lord Michael proposed are indeed very favorable. Meg could understand Michael. Not only did he have to bear the pressure from the Wind Forest, but he also had to consider the feelings of Chaos City's residents, as well as the possible instability brought about by 20,000 elves entering the city. Finding a fixed job would mean that the new elves would have the ability to survive in Chaos City, and the risk of accidents would be minimized. But it's not easy to find 20,000 jobs. Are we going to let them go on the streets to look for jobs? Irina frowned. Leave the jobs to me. Don't let them occupy the jobs of Chaos City's residents. This might cause new conflicts, and cause the residents to be disgusted. Meg shook his head with a smile. Irina looked at Meg. After pondering for a while, she smiled, and said, "All right, I'll leave it to you. Father, aren't we going to beat up the bad guys tonight? Can I wear my black clothes and go beat up the bad guys?" Amy asked expectantly as she leaned in Meg's arms to dry her hair after taking a shower. "We won't be going tonight. Let's go tomorrow night." Meg shook his head with a smile. He helped Amy and Anna dry their hair, and then told them a bedtime story. After the two of them fell asleep, he went to the study, took out a pen and paper, and began to draw the blueprint. Although the factory's plan had already taken shape in his mind, he still needed a detailed plan before it could be completed. The details were very important. North of the city. Little girl, don't be afraid. We're really gentlemen. We just feel that it's very dangerous for you to walk on the streets alone, so we want to send you home, 7 to 8 uncles said gently as they surrounded a shivering little girl. I just came out to buy some things. The little girl's voice was a little shaky. However, she slowly relaxed when she saw that these strange uncles were just surrounding her without any intention of going forward. She returned to her own house surrounded by a group of people. Aya. Bro, give me some space. Bro, you're already sitting on top of me. Aren't there a lot of walls around us? Why do you have to come here? No. Bro, you don't know that there are 2 layers of people on the walls. There are too many gentlemen, and I'm a little scared. Just squeeze a little and give me some space. The wonderful book house. Chapter 1460. The Gentleman Alliance's recruitment order made the north of the city particularly lively tonight. Because there were too many gentlemen who were summoned, the uneven distribution of criminals was greatly magnified and caused some disputes. In the southwest corner of the slums in the north of the city, a skinny half-orc with a wretched appearance was curled up in the corner, looking at the dozen or so gentlemen surrounding him with fear. However, these gentlemen had not done anything to him yet. Instead, they were arguing among themselves. "Brother, I saw this thief first. He should belong to me," a tall knight said righteously. "No, no. Everyone has eyes. How can you say that you saw him first? If I didn't yell, he would have reached out his evil claws to that little girl," a muscular demon said while shaking his head. "I don't care. He was knocked down by my slippers. That's my trophy. You shouldn't fight with me," an orc argued while putting on his shoes. "I saw him first. I wanted to catch him." Everyone was arguing, and the atmosphere was very tense. It felt like they were going to fight to determine the winner. The orc was stunned when he heard that. How did the world suddenly change? The slums in the north of the city, which had been completely ignored by the city, suddenly had these strange fellows. After a while, he asked weakly, "Can I go now?" "Get lost." Everyone gave him a kick at the same time and kicked him back to the corner. Then, they continued to fight for the ownership of this stupid thief. You can kill me." After being surrounded and fighting for ownership for half an hour, the stupid thief finally couldn't help but explode. He knelt on the ground and cried bitterly, "I just wanted to snatch a candy. It's just a candy." The scene was silent for a moment. Everyone looked at each other. "You think you're in the right to snatch a candy?" The irascible orc kicked him over. "Don't you know what you look like? You came out in the middle of the night to snatch a little girl's candy. What if you scared her?" The knight gave him another kick. "If we didn't appear, you might not have just wanted to snatch a candy. Didn't this knife fall from your body? The smell of fresh blood on it doesn't seem too old. You must have stabbed someone with this knife not too long ago." An elf picked up a short knife from the ground. That's just something I picked up." The half-beast man's gaze was obviously evasive. The horseman stepped forward and looked at the crowd. "All right, there's so many of us. We won't be able to get anything out of it. We can't just split a leg or a few pounds of meat, right? Let's come up with a list and send this guy to the Grey Temple. They are more experienced than us in interrogating people." "All right." Everyone nodded in agreement. They found a pen and paper and wrote a name list. Then, two of them tied up the half-orc and sent him directly to the Grey Temple. The same thing was happening in the dark corners of the northern part of the city. Overall, there was a situation where there were fewer thieves and more gentlemen. Often, a group of gentlemen would argue for half an hour over the ownership of a thief. There were even cases where the thief could not bear the pressure and committed suicide. Apart from the gentleman alliance that came spontaneously, the City Lord's castle and the Grey Temple had also sent a few more patrol teams with prison wagons to make it easier for the gentlemen to directly hand over the captured criminals. "Captain, the Gentleman Alliance caught more criminals in a night than we did in a month." A young inspector from the Grey Temple exclaimed to himself as he looked at the 3 wagons full of criminals. "These fellows are usually very sly. They know our patrol routes and timings, so it's very difficult to catch them. However, this Gentleman Alliance that suddenly appeared made use of the human wave tactic to make them unable to hide. It's indeed very effective." That captain nodded. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at those criminals in the prison wagons. "There are a few big fish in there that have been giving us headaches for a long time. Once we're done with this round, Chaos City will become a lot safer. The mysterious person who started the Gentleman's Alliance is really admirable," the young inspector praised. "People who can take the initiative to maintain order in Chaos City are all admirable," the captain said with a nod. That night, although many tiles in the old houses in the slums in the northern part of the city were crushed, the people living there had a good night's sleep. Most of the gentlemen had already left in the latter half of the night, but there were still some who stayed until dawn. They guarded Chaos City at night. The morning sun shone on the gentlemen who were curled up on the wall with their eyebrows stained white by the frost. A smile appeared on their tired faces as they got up to shake off the frost on their cotton-padded clothes before disappearing from the wall. In just one night, the Bastille prison's cells were already in a state of emergency because of the overcrowding. Meg also stayed up the whole night. When the morning sun shone in through the window, he realized with a start that he had already spent the whole night drawing. It's indeed not easy to be a drawing dog and a writing dog. Meg cracked his neck as he cracked his neck. He got up to tidy up the messy drawings on the table according to their order, and flipped through them before putting them back on the bookshelf. The drawings for the machinery and factory were already done, but the specific process had not been written down yet. He could only take some time out during the day to do that. He raised his hand to look at his watch. It was already 6 a.m. It seemed like there was no time to catch up on sleep. He stretched his back and warmed up his body. He went straight to the bathroom for a cold shower, and woke up immediately. Meg now had the physique of a 9th-tier knight, and his body was extremely strong. He had only stayed up the whole night, so he would not be so sleepy. He went downstairs to prepare breakfast for everyone. Mia and the rest also came to the restaurant one after another. They all had light dark circles under their eyes. "Why? Didn't you all sleep well last night?" Meg asked with a smile as he scooped porridge for everyone. "Boss, you have no idea how lively it was in the north of the city last night. Those gentlemen from the Gentlemen's League were so crazy. They simply wiped out all the bad guys and criminals in the north of the city. We searched for the whole night, and only caught 2 thieves who stole the ceramic vats. We were almost robbed," Yarbemia said excitedly. "I reckon that they have already caught 70 to 80% of the bad guys in the north of the city last night. I'm afraid the rest don't have the guts to come out and commit crimes," Camilla said. "You're a group of 7th tier, 8th tier, and 9th tier magicians, giant dragons, and vampires. Isn't it a bit too much to catch 2 thieves who stole ceramic vats?" Meg raised his eyebrows. He was a bit surprised by the enthusiasm of the Gentlemen's League. He had originally thought that it would be good enough if there were people who would respond, but the result seemed to have far exceeded his expectations. "This makes me very troubled. Those bad guys originally belonged to me, but now I can't even compete with them." Connie sighed. He was a little sad. He thought for a while, and his eyes lit up. "But, can I ask my master to release those bad guys in prison? Then I can kill them one by one." Wonderful Bookhouse. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.